She stood in the grand ballroom of Thornwick Hall, a crystal glass trembling in her hand, and no one looked at her. Her husband, Lysander Ashcroft, the Duke of Thornwick, stood across the room with his back half turned. Candlelight caught the silver threading of his dark coat. He was speaking to Lady Clarissa Mowbray, whose gloved hand rested on his sleeve as if she belonged there. The Duchess did not belong there. She was merely present. Alara had worn the emerald silk he once offhandedly remarked suited her eyes. He had not noticed. She had held her breath when he entered the ballroom, hopping for the smallest glance. Nothing. The hum of polite conversation felt like a wall between them. Lord and Lady Pemberton passed her with the briefest nod, their eyes sliding away. Everyone knew. The Duke had married her because of a scandal her father had caused before his death, a financial ruin that had stained the family name. The Ashcroft name was old and powerful, and the alliance had scrubbed the stain away. In return, Alara had brought nothing but herself, a wife of duty. She had loved him from the very first day, quietly, foolishly. A footman offered champagne. She shook her head and set her glass down. Her fingers were cold despite the heat of the crowd. As she moved toward the terrace for air, she heard a voice behind a marble pillar. The poor thing, still following him with her eyes. It's almost pathetic. Lady Clarissa's laugh was soft and silvery. Lysander does what he must. He is a man of honor, but affection cannot be commanded. Alara froze, the words wrapped around her throat. She waited for her husband's voice to defend her, even from simple courtesy. Instead, she heard his quiet murmur, too low to distinguish. But his tone held no warmth, no correction. The pain that bloomed in her chest was physical. She had spent 2 years as the Duchess of Thornwick. 2 years of quiet breakfasts where he read his correspondence and never met her eyes. 2 years of ballrooms where she stood beside him like a portrait, visible but not seen. 2 years of hoping that patience would unlock the door he had closed on their wedding night with a polite, "I shall not trouble you. Rest well." She had accepted it as gentleness then. Now she understood it was distance. Alara slipped through the terrace doors. The night air was sharp, the stars clear and indifferent. She pressed her palm against the stone balustrade and let the cold ground her. That was the night the hope inside her began to crumble, not with anger, not with tears, just a quiet, hollow surrender. She whispered into the darkness, "I will not beg to be loved, not anymore." The next morning, Alara woke with a strange stillness in her heart. Her maid, Bess, helped her into a simple dove-gray day dress. She did not ask what the Duke preferred for breakfast. She did not wait in the breakfast room, hoping he would sit beside her. Instead, she took a cup of tea alone in the conservatory, surrounded by ferns and fatting roses. It was the first morning she did not shape her routine around his shadow. He did not notice. Days passed. Lysander attended Parliament, rode with his steward, reviewed ledgers. When they dined together, which was rare, the silence between them felt like thick glass. Only now, Alara no longer tried to break it. She answered his questions with calm, short replies. She did not linger after the meal. She did not ask about his day. It took a week before something shifted. He looked up from his paper one evening and found the chair across from him empty. She had excused herself with a murmured good night and left him alone in the firelight. He frowned at the closed door. It was the first time he noticed her absence was not a lack, but a choice. The change began subtly in Alara's life. She had always been kind and intelligent, but now she directed those gifts beyond the walls of Thornwick Hall. She started visiting the village school, a drafty building where children learned their letters by a struggling fire. The teacher, a gentle woman named Mrs. Hartley, was overwhelmed. Alara began spending her mornings there, reading to the youngest children, helping the older ones with their sums. The villagers were cautious at first. The Duchess had always been a distant figure, veiled in silence. But Alara knelt on the dusty floor beside a little girl who could not read, and she smiled with such genuine patience that the barriers melted. Word spread. The Duchess was not proud. She was simply kind. Her afternoons she gave to the estate's forgotten gardens. Thornwick's grounds had been renowned a generation ago, but neglect had let the hedges grow wild and the fountains fall silent. She hired Mr. Gideon Hawke, a young landscape architect with sun-streaked hair and an easy smile, recommended by the vicar. He was talented and earnest, and he never looked at her with pity. He spoke to her as an equal, his hands stained with soil, his eyes bright with vision. "Your Grace, if we restore the eastern parterre, the lavender alone would scent the whole south wing," he said one afternoon, unrolling a sketch. Alara leaned over the drawing, genuinely interested. "And the old sundial, can it be salvaged?" "I think it can. It's buried under brambles, but stone endures. Just needs someone to see its worth again." His words struck a chord he could not have intended. She looked at the sundial's faded image and nodded. "Then we shall save it." Weeks melted into months. Alara's cheeks gained color from the sun. Her hands were no longer perfectly soft. Small calluses formed from holding gardening shears. She laughed more quietly with the children. She spent long hours in the fresh air, breathing deeply. The tight knot of longing in her chest loosened, replaced by a calm, self-made purpose. Lysander, meanwhile, grew restless. His study felt larger and colder. He found himself listening for footsteps that no longer paused outside his door. At dinner, he observed his wife across the long table. She spoke of the school, of the garden progress, of Mrs. Hartley's new assistant. Her voice was pleasant but no longer intimate. She did not seek his opinion or his approval. She informed him politely, as one might inform a distant cousin. One evening, she wore a soft blue gown he had never seen before. Her hair was dressed simply, a few loose curls brushing her neck. He realized he could not remember the last time he had watched her dress for an evening. Had she always moved with such quiet grace? Had her eyes always held that steady, serene light? "You seem very occupied these days," he said, his voice cutting the silence. Alara looked up from her plate. "Yes, the garden restoration is at a critical stage, and the children are preparing a small concert for the village. It is fulfilling work." "You are often gone from the house." "There is much to be done." Her tone was not defensive, it was factual. She did not apologize. He wanted to say something else, but the words felt clumsy. He had never had to pursue her attention. It had always been there, waiting. The realization that it was no longer offered was an unfamiliar sting. Autumn arrived, painting the restored gardens in gold and rust. The eastern parterre was transformed. Neat hedges, ribbons of lavender, and at its heart, the sundial now cleaned and gleaming, its shadow marking the hours with quiet dignity. Alara stood beside Gideon Hawke as they surveyed the final work. "You have done wonders, Mr. Hawke," she said, her smile genuine. "We have done wonders, Your Grace. A garden needs a heart. You gave it one." He paused, his gaze lingering on her face a moment longer than proper. "Thornwick Hall is fortunate to have you." Before she could respond, a shadow fell over them. Lysander had come down the gravel path, his riding boots crunching. He was supposed to be in the village. His unexpected appearance was a discordant note. His eyes, cold and sharp, flicked from Alara to Gideon, noting their proximity, the sketch in the architect's hand, the easy smile still fading from his wife's lips. "Mr. Hawke," Lysander said, the title clipped. Gideon bowed respectfully. "Your Grace, I was just showing Her Grace the completed parterre." "So I see." The tension was immediate. Alara felt it coil in the air. Lysander's jaw was tight, his posture rigid. "Thank you, Mr. Hawke. That will be all for today," Lysander said, a clear dismissal. Gideon glanced at Alara, a flicker of concern in his kind eyes. She gave the smallest nod. He bowed again and withdrew, leaving the Duke and Duchess alone beside the ancient sundial. "You did not tell me the architect would be here so frequently," Lysander said, his voice low. Alara met his gaze without flinching. "You never asked. I have mentioned the garden's progress many times. You did not seem interested." "I am the master of this estate. I am interested in who spends hours with my wife." The possessive words hung between them. A month ago, she might have been wounded by his suspicion. Now, a quiet, unimpressed calm settled over her. "Mr. Hawke is a professional fulfilling a contract. He has been courteous and respectful. I am sorry you think so little of my judgment." She turned and began walking back toward the house, her pace even. Lysander stood motionless, watching her retreat. The sting of her calm reply was worse than any tears would have been. She did not defend herself with passion. She simply did not care enough to fight. The jealousy that flared in his chest was sudden and raw. He had never imagined her with another man. He had never imagined her away from his side at all. Now the image of Hawke's admiring gaze was a thorn driven deep. That evening, Lysander did something he had never done before. He sought her out. He found her not in the drawing room, but in the small, sun-faded library she had claimed as her own. She was reading by the window, a single candle lit. She looked up in surprise when he entered. "May I join you?" he asked, the formality stiff. "Of course, this is your home." He sat opposite her, his fingers interlaced. The fire crackled. He did not know how to begin. "I have not been present," he said finally. "I see that now." Elara closed her book slowly. Her expression was unreadable. "You were never present, Lysander, from the first day. I simply stopped waiting for you to arrive." The honesty struck him like a cold wind. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "I did not know you were waiting." "Then you did not look." Silence stretched. He realized with sharp clarity that she was not angry. Anger would have been a flame he could warm himself against. This was distance, an ocean already crossed. "Elara," he began, but she stood. "I am not angry with you, truly. I have made a life that brings me peace. I would ask you not to disturb that peace with sudden curiosity. It is not fair." She left the room, the soft rustle of her skirts the only sound. Lysander remained in the chair, staring at the book she had left behind. Regret was a cold, heavy stone settling in his stomach. He had thought his indifference was a shield. He had not realized it was a slow poison. The following weeks were a strange, aching dance. Lysander began to appear at the school. He stood at the back of the classroom, watching Elara help a boy with his slate. The children were shy of the tall, stern Duke, but Elara's gentle ease calmed them. She did not acknowledge him beyond a polite nod. He saw the admiration in the teacher's eyes, in the children's faces. His wife was loved here. He had never seen that before. He found excuses to be near the gardens. He watched from his study window as she walked the lavender paths alone, her hand brushing the blooms. Her silhouette against the autumn light was achingly beautiful. He had possessed a treasure and ignored it. Gideon Hawke's contract was ending. Lysander felt a guilty relief when the final plans were submitted. At the last meeting, he insisted on being present. Hawke was professional, but his farewell to Elara held a warmth that made Lysander's knuckles whiten. "Your Grace, it has been an honor," Hawke said quietly, his eyes holding hers. "Thornwick will remember your work, Mr. Hawke. As will I." She gave him a small, gracious smile. Lysander stepped forward, his voice cutting through the moment. "I will escort you out, Hawke." He walked the architect to the front drive, his stride stiff. At the door he spoke low. "My wife is a duchess. Do not mistake her kindness for anything else." Gideon met his gaze evenly. "I have only ever respected her grace. Perhaps, your grace, you should ask yourself why you feel the need to warn me." He climbed into his carriage without another word. The door closed. Lysander felt the weight of the man's words like a blow. That night a storm rolled over the countryside. Lightning split the sky and rain hammered the windows. Elara retired early, feeling a chill deep in her bones. By midnight she was burning with fever. Bess, the maid, rushed to Lysander's room in a panic. "Your Grace, the Duchess is very ill. She's shivering and burning up." Lysander's blood turned to ice. He strode to her chambers, a place he had never entered since their wedding night. The room was dim, a fire sputtering. Ilara lay in the great bed, her dark hair plastered to her forehead, her cheeks flushed unnaturally. She was mumbling, her eyes half closed. He knelt beside the bed, his heart pounding. "Ilara, Ilara, look at me." Her eyes struggled to focus. "Lysander," her voice was a thin thread. "You should not be here, I will be fine." "You are not fine. Send for the physician immediately," he barked at Bess, who fled. He took her hand. It was scorching. She tried to pull it away weakly. "Please, don't trouble yourself. I know you never wanted to." "Hush, hush, Ilara." His voice broke, fear, real and cold and paralyzing, seized him. He realized in that moment with terrifying clarity that he could not lose her. The thought of these rooms empty, the garden silent without her footsteps, the breakfast room truly alone, it was a void he could not bear. He pressed her hand to his lips, a gesture he had never offered. "You cannot leave me, you cannot." The physician came and went. The fever was severe, a lung inflammation. For 3 days, Ilara drifted between consciousness and delirium. Lysander did not leave her side. He canceled all appointments. He ignored his steward's urgent messages. He sat in a chair dragged to her bedside, holding her hand, listening to her labored breathing. In her fevered dreams, she spoke. Fragments of her silent suffering spilled out like broken glass. "Please look at me, just once. I wore the green silk, do you see? No, you never see. The garden. I made a garden so someone would love something I touched. I am not a duty, I am a person. I am a person." Lysander listened, and each word was a lash. He had done this. His coldness, his neglect, his inability to let go of a past wound had carved a hollow in this woman's heart, and he had not even known how deeply she had loved him. On the 4th morning, her fever broke. She opened her eyes and saw the pale dawn light, the rumpled figure of the Duke asleep in a chair, his hand still loosely holding hers. His dark hair was disheveled, his jaw shadowed with beard. He looked unguarded and exhausted. She did not understand. He had never shown such care. She gently pulled her hand away. The movement woke him. He sat up, his eyes finding hers instantly. Relief flooded his face, so raw it made her breath catch. "You're awake, the fever is gone," he said hoarsely. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "You have duties, you should not have stayed." He reached for her hand again, and this time she did not pull away from shock. "There is no duty more important than you. I have been a fool, Ilara, a blind, proud fool. I heard you in your fever. I heard what I did to you." She turned her face away, tears slipping onto the pillow. "You were not meant to hear that. It was a past life. I have moved forward." "I have not," he said, his voice cracking. "I am still standing in that ballroom, watching you drift away, and I am terrified I am too late." The confession hung in the quiet room. Ilara's heart, which she had so carefully guarded, trembled. She had dreamed of these words for years, but now they came too late. Too late. The phrase echoed. She did not know if she had the strength to reopen the door. "Please rest," she said, her voice steady but distant. "We can speak later." Lysander saw the wall still standing. He had built it. Now he had to dismantle it brick by brick. In the days of her recovery, he brought her tea himself. He read to her from the books in her small library, his deep voice stumbling over poetry he would never have chosen. He did not push. He did not demand. He simply stayed. Ilara watched him, confused and wary. Was it guilt? Gratitude for managing his household? She did not dare call it love. One afternoon, with winter sunlight pale through the window, she asked, "Why did you marry me? Truly?" He sat in the chair across from her, a blanket over her knees. He looked at his hands for a long moment. "The scandal your father left was immense. My family's name could absorb it. An alliance was proposed. I agreed because I was numb. 5 years before I met you, I loved a woman named Isabella. She was my world. She was also promised to another, a man of her family's choosing. I would have defied everything for her, but she chose duty over me. She left without a word. I received only a letter saying she could not bear the ruin of both our families. I was angry. betrayed. I shut my heart away. When your father's situation arose, I married you because I believed I would never love again. It was an arrangement. You would have a title and protection, and I would have a duchess to fulfill the role. I did not plan to be cruel. I simply planned to feel nothing. Ilara absorbed his words. A lost love, not a comparison but a scar that had left no room for her. She felt a strange, sad compassion. And Clarissa Mowbray, she asked quietly. A friend of Isabella. She sought me out after Isabella left. I allowed her attention because it was empty. It required nothing of me. There was never anything more. I have not touched her. I have not touched anyone. He met her eyes. I have been a ghost in this house. And you were so full of warmth, and I was terrified of being burned again, so I kept you at a distance. Ilara looked down at the blanket. You were not the only one who learned to live with distance. I stopped waiting, Lysander. I stopped hopping. I made myself a life where your neglect could not reach me. I know, and I am more grateful for that strength than I can say because it kept you whole. But I am begging you now, don't let my past steal our future. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I am asking for a chance. One real chance. The sincerity in his voice was a blade and a balm. She had wanted to hear it for so long. Now fear held her back. If she opened her heart again and he retreated, the second breaking would destroy her. She said nothing, only nodded faintly. I need time. Take all the time you need. I will be here, not out of duty, because I cannot be anywhere else. Winter deepened. The halls of Thornwick Hall grew quieter under snow, but inside, a delicate truce bloomed. Lysander joined Ilara at the school again, but this time he did not stand at the back. He sat on a small stool and let a boy show him a picture of a horse. His awkward smile made the children giggle. Ilara watched from across the room, her heart squeezing. He began leaving small things for her. A book he thought she might enjoy, resting on the window seat of her library. A single winter rose placed on her breakfast plate. No grand declarations, just quiet, consistent presence. One evening he found her in the conservatory, looking out at the frozen garden. The sundial was capped with snow. I have a confession, he said, standing a few feet away. When you were ill, I was afraid of something, not just losing you. I was afraid that if you died, you would die believing I never cared, that your last thought of me would be that I saw you as a duty. The weight of that was unbearable. Ilara turned to him, her expression soft but guarded. I would have died knowing I built a garden that mattered, and that the village children could read a little better. It would have been enough. But I would not have been enough. I was nothing to you. His voice broke, and that was my doing. She took a step toward him, the first voluntary step she had made. You are not nothing to me. That is the problem. You never were. I just learned to live with the pain. Then let me try to turn that pain into something else. I am not asking for what we had. I am asking to build something new, slowly, honestly. Slowly, honestly. The words echoed her own longing for something real. She looked into his eyes, those cold, distant eyes that now held a desperate, open plea, and she felt the last of her resistance crack. Not break, just crack enough to let a sliver of light in. Then let us start with honesty, she said. No more walls, no more silence. If you feel yourself withdrawing, you must tell me. If I feel myself closing, I will tell you. We have both been alone in this marriage. I will not be alone again. He exhaled a breath he did not know he was holding. Agreed, completely agreed. They stood together, watching the snow fall on the sundial, the stone that had been buried and forgotten and was now seen and cherished. Spring came, and with it, the first real test. Lady Clarissa Mowbray returned to the county for a house party at a neighboring estate. She called at Thornwick Hall, all smiles and sharp glances. Ilara received her in the drawing-room with polite grace, her posture straight, her serenity unshaken. Clarissa's eyes flicked over Ilara's simple elegance, then to Lysander's attentive presence beside his wife. You are looking well, Duchess. The country air must agree with you. Lysander, you are positively domesticated. Who would have thought? Lysander's smile did not reach his eyes. Happiness suits my wife. It suits me as well. Clarissa's expression flickered. She attempted a familiar touch on his arm. We must catch up properly. So many memories. Lysander stepped closer to Alara, his hand lightly touching the small of her back. The gesture was protective, claiming, and completely natural. My wife and I have a quiet evening planned. I am sure you understand. Alara felt the warmth of his hand through her gown. She had not realized how much she needed this small, public declaration. Not a show, but a quiet boundary. Clarissa departed with a brittle smile, and Alara turned to him with a question in her eyes. You did not have to send her away so firmly. Yes, I did. For every time I let her orbit me and made you feel invisible, I will spend the rest of my life correcting that, if you will let me. She reached up and touched his cheek, the first tender touch she had initiated since her sickness. His eyes closed briefly, as if the sensation was almost too much. I am learning to let you, she whispered. The estate was holding a summer fete for the village, a tradition Alara had revived. The gardens were in full glory, the lavender scent thick in the warm air. Laughter and music filled the grounds. Alara moved among the tenants, knowing names, asking after bobbies, remembering small details. Lysander stood aside, watching her with a reverence that made his steward do a double take. During the dancing, Gideon Hawke arrived as a guest. He was kind and respectful, and when he asked Alara for a dance, she accepted with a friendly smile. Lysander's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He trusted her. He trusted the calm way she held distance and courtesy. The jealousy was still there, a green-eyed flicker, but it was tempered by something stronger, faith. Later that night, when the lanterns were lit and the music softened, Lysander drew Alara away to the restored parterre. The sundial glowed faintly under the moon. I have a gift for you, he said, pressing a small velvet box into her palm. She opened it. Inside lay a ring, not a grand duchess's jewel, but a delicate band woven with small emeralds and tiny lavender blossoms, enameled with exquisite care. It is a garden ring, he said, his voice rough. Because you taught me that things can be restored, that love can grow if you tend it. I should have given you a ring that meant something the day we married. This one means everything I should have said. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked from the ring to his face, and saw the man who had been a stranger in her own home, now standing bare and hopeful before her. You loved me too late, she said softly, and his face fell. But then she continued, but you loved me when I could finally believe it. Put it on my finger, Lysander, and let us never speak of lateness again. Only now. He slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands. Then he cupped her face and kissed her forehead, her closed eyelids, the corner of her mouth, a reverent, gentle journey. It was not passion, it was a promise. In the following months, the household changed. Laughter was heard in the corridors. The Duke and Duchess took breakfast together, and he actually looked at her while she spoke. They rode the estate together, planned a new greenhouse, and argued gently about the placement of rose trellises. One autumn evening, a letter arrived. It was from Isabella. She was widowed and living quietly in the north, and she had heard of Lysander's happy marriage. She wrote not to stir old embers, but to offer a long-overdue apology for the pain she had caused and to wish him well. Lysander read the letter and felt nothing. A quiet closure. He showed it to Alara without hesitation. She read it carefully, then looked up at him. Do you need to reply? Only to say that I am content, and I hope she finds her own garden to tend. Alara smiled, and they burned the letter together in the library fire, watching the past curl into ash. The years unfurled gently. Alara continued her schoolwork, and Lysander became a patron of education, funding a new building so the children would never be cold. The gardens became famous, and visitors came to see the sundial and the lavender. But the true heart of Thornwick Hall was no longer a place. It was the quiet understanding between two people who had walked through loneliness and found each other on the other side. One night many years later, as they sat on a bench by the sundial, Lysander took her hand. The garden ring glinted in the starlight. "I was thinking," he said, "of the day you first stopped waiting. I remember the stillness in you. I was too blind to see it as strength. Now I know it was the moment you chose yourself." "I chose peace," she said. "And then you chose me. That is the part I will never forget. You could have remained distant. You chose to cross the distance. I would cross it 1,000 times, for 1,000 years." She leaned her head on his shoulder. The sundial's shadow rested, marking the hour when time no longer mattered. Only the present, full and warm and alive, surrounded them. And in the village the children learned to read. And in the garden the lavender bloomed. And in Thornwick Hall love, once neglected, grew deep roots that no frost could ever touch. It was not a perfect love. It was a restored one, and that made it the most precious thing of all. He looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for waiting long enough for me to find you." She turned her head and kissed his cheek, her heart whole at last. "Thank you for finding me before the garden froze." They remained there as the stars wheeled overhead, two figures no longer separated by silence, but woven together by words finally spoken, by wounds finally healed, by a love that came not too late, but exactly when they were both able to receive it. And the night was gentle, and the world was good, and the Duchess who had stopped waiting was finally, irrevocably home.